There's going to come a time in your life, in your growth, in your healing journey, where you're going to continuously tell yourself, I'm not that person anymore. And that's a really good frame of reference, and it's a good framework to come back to. And it's a good mantra to keep telling yourself. But what's also is going to be required from you is to take actions, big and small actions, that support the idea that who you are now is different to the version of you that you've been in the past. So, for example, if we're trying to heal a wound, we have to let that wound heal on its own without itching it. And the same goes for a certain anxiety, for a certain fear, for a certain belief system. If we want to outgrow it, if we want to be more of it, if we want to evolve past it and be a different version of ourselves, we have to allow that fear or anxiety to exist without reaffirming it with our behaviors, with our words, with our actions. Because this is what happens. As soon as you make the decision, I want to act from a place of a different state of being, I want to act from a place of being a different version of myself, your brain says, okay, just show me proof and I'll believe it. You don't need to convince me. You don't need to make a closing argument. You don't need an introduction. You don't need a conclusion. I don't need any of that. Just prove it to me. Just show me through actions. Show me through your words that you're willing to believe it. Because that's the key. We don't have to become that version of ourselves by tricking ourselves into believing. We just have to have the willingness to believe in it. And that willingness looks like approaching life and encountering the circumstances of life in a different way. So if the old version of you would hide away when things seem kind of uncertain and not really in control, then the new version of you finds opportunity in the difficulties, in the uncomfortable. If it makes you uncomfortable, it's an opportunity for you to put points on the board for this new version of yourself. That's the way you need to look at it. Because if you're always looking at uncomfortable situations and difficulties as things and hurdles you just have to move through because life is just kind of setting it up in that way, you're going to continue existing in that version of yourself, because that version of yourself doesn't necessarily make the most of the events of their life. But this version of yourself sees these opportunities. Because remember, every fear you have, every anxiety you have, they only become conquered when you go about your life in a way where you're not letting them deter you onto a different path. People think that the best way to overcome a fear or anxiety is to simply, act like it's not there. But that statement is true, but not in the way that you think. Act like it's not there. Break that down. You need to act like it's not there. So it's not your attitude. It's not the way you're approaching your own mind, but rather it's the way you're taking actions in your life. Because every single action we take, every single choice we make, it's always reaffirming some sort of identity. And this is the hard part, because yes, it's extremely uncomfortable and it's very difficult to embrace and accept uncertainty and the unknown and facing these difficult things that sort of make you anxious, and it's a lot easier to just not do it and sit home in your comfort zone or whatever it may be. But that easier path is going to lead you into being the same person that you've always been and repeating those same sort of cycles and patterns that you've always been experiencing. If you want to be someone different, you have to approach situations in life differently. You have to take different actions. You have to make different choices. So imagine what the old you would do, or maybe even what the you now is sort of naturally inclined to do, whether that is give fear a pedestal, give anxiety a strong opinion and say in whatever decision you're going to make, or your sort of ability to cling to your comfort zone, acknowledge that, view that, and see that for you to encounter different experiences in your life, for you to change your life, you're going to have to act in a completely different way to that version of yourself. Telling yourself you're not shying away from being in the light, telling yourself that you're not scared or anxious of that thing is much differently than acting in a way that kind of shows one of two things: that, of course, A, that you're not scared, you're not anxious of that thing, or number two, that you're willing to face that anxiety or fear as a result of a willingness to be free of it, if that makes sense. We believe that we have to tackle the whole world and we have to tackle our entire sort of paradigm and system of who we are all at once. But really, we just need the willingness and the bravery to even try. Because once we have the willingness and we're willing to repeat these behaviors and actions over and over that push us through discomfort, that push us through anxiety and fear, this opens the mind up to change. Because even if the doubt exists that we as ourselves can fundamentally change, that going through these experiences and these difficulties and these situations are going to get objectively easier, that doesn't change that it actually will get easier. Because the doubt can persist, but so can the growth. And everyone who has ever grown out of an old conditioning, out of an old identity, and became a version of themselves that they really wanted to, they did so by allowing the doubt to exist, but not deter them from taking actions in place with a system that they know that works. For example, if you have an event coming up that requires you to be in the light, that requires you to face discomfort, that requires you to move through uncomfortable situations, what action are you going to take? Are you going to take road number one, which is call the whole thing off? You're feeling anxious about it, you're feeling worried about it, it's better just to not do it. Or you're going to take road number two, you're going to see it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to feel shitty, it's not going to feel good, but after, I'm going to feel a lot better about myself because I overcame the fear and anxiety that was associated with this event, with this situation. And what happens is when you take that second path, the one I just mentioned, you reaffirm to your mind the kind of person that you are. This starts to build confidence, charisma, and self-belief. Because you don't need all these external comforts. You're not only picking and choosing events that make you feel safe and comfortable and in your comfort zone. I know I just repeated comfort 2 times, but that's really what it is. Comfort as a feeling and the comfort zone as an environment go hand in hand. And we can't feed either of those because they'll slowly act like quicksand and bringing us down and down and down and lowering our tolerance for experiencing life as a whole. I mentioned something like this in my upcoming book where I said that, the tolerance that a backpacker who's been traveling all over the world has for anxious and stress-inducing situations is probably going to be much greater than that of someone who never leaves their house. Because think about the events, the anxieties, the stresses that backpacker is facing on a daily basis, and then compare that to the very stress-free sort of environment that the person who sits at home sort of encounters. And I'm not saying either path is relatively correct. Maybe the backpacker goes a little bit too far. Maybe too much stress isn't good for us. But at the same time, that person who's sitting in their home is going to continue to suffer at the hands of their own mind, their own thoughts, their own emotions, because it's them in their own comfort